Thanks everybody for coming to this, and as we wrap up this incredible conference, really appreciate you being here. Knowing it was towards the end of the conference, we thought it would be good to talk about the future. I'm Brant Houston from the University of Illinois, and I'm also chair of the board of GIJN. And I've been doing data for a long time and watching how things have changed. So the basic idea of this session is everybody here will introduce themselves as they speak and talk about what they see as what the newsroom will look like in 3 to 5 years with all the different tools. And do we all agree we're having AI fever now? Everything AI. And we want to really talk about that in a practical way too. We only have one formal presentation, and then we have this informal presentation by me, which is exactly one slide. So has anyone ever heard of or seen Mirror Worlds, this book that came out in the early 90s? Anybody? Okay, so I thought it would be good to just start with something by this computer scientist, David Gelernter, wrote this book. And at that time, it was inspiring to me because he imagined this world that you could get up in the morning and look at your computer, and a very small computer, and get the weather and the traffic and maps and all the information you might want to need or get or knowledge or so forth. And none of that really existed at that point. And I was just really getting deep into data at that point, so it really inspired me. Now the second half of the book is a lot of coding. I just went, that's too much for me. But the first half, this vision of what you be in the morning was just amazing and what's come true. And the only thing he really got wrong is he thought you could have the whole world in something as small as a shoebox. Okay, so this wasn't around yet. So I just wanted to say that we're constantly trying to predict, to have visions, to have dreams, and that's how they come true. And so we're just gonna take a sample of where we think we're going and what our day would look like in a newsroom in a few years. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with Bo Young. I'm gonna give you the microphone, and I'm gonna let everyone introduce themselves, but I'm really sure that you can see here, the one person that was removed was Bo Young, who was ill at the beginning of this and is back. So we should start with you for sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brent. Hello, everyone. My name is Bo Young Lim. I am a senior editor and an AI network manager at the Pulitzer Center. We're a nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. I'll talk a little bit about the hype and fear around AI and what we're doing a little bit at the Pulitzer Center to bridge the gaps that we see in the world. Not necessarily individual newsrooms, but freelancing and news outlets in general. So our AI Accountability Network is an initiative we launched last year, and it has two pillars. One is reporting on AI, helping journalists to hold algorithms and humans behind it accountable, and try to help the public and our communities understand how these technologies are impacting our lives. So it's a little bit of an investigative, accountability, explanatory area, and we're trying to help journalists all around the world build the capacity to be able to cover AI as not just as a tech beat, but as part of everyone's job, because if you throw a stone somewhere, you probably would find an AI system that is impacting you in one way or another. The other side is how to help journalists use AI in their investigations. So King, I believe, will talk a little bit about what we did in terms of using machine learning to help us crunch big data in investigations. Since I have limited time, I'm just going to go to the challenges. We are seeing the huge gap and asymmetry in terms of capacity, knowledge, resources to be able to help journalists cover this issue in a responsible way. I mean, most of the technologies that we are seeing today are mostly developed in Western countries, Silicon Valley, and most of those developed countries have better public records laws, and there's better means and tools for journalists to get their hands on data and try to do a more systemic story. Whereas in the rest of the world. These datas are not there. There are bigger harms, and people are not understanding what's happening to their lives. So I was talking just before this panel session to my new friend and great data journalist from the Middle East, Ethar, here from Arij. This is my takeaway from this conference is it's not fair. There's no data, or the governments are so stringent on the data that journalists are having so much trouble covering AI when in the places where we need this type of reporting the most. So my question, and I'll leave it to the wonderful speakers here to try to answer or come together to an answer, is how can we better bridge the gaps as news outlets and freelance journalists, and how can we better support all of us to connect the dots, because these harms and influences of these technologies are global. And this is a Global Investigative Journalism Conference, so I think we're here to talk about it. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll hand it over to King.
Hi everyone, my name is King. So as Boyang has mentioned, I am the data editor at the Pulitzer Center. I joined Pulitzer Center 3 years ago, but before that I have been doing data journalism training, coaching in mostly Asia and Southeast Asia specifically. So I'm going to do some prediction, and I'm really bad at that. As you can see, I have a degree in chemical engineering, and later I became a journalist. So you see how bad my prediction was. Okay, in the past 3 years, I have been working on environmental data, and I think in the future, I think there's, I hope, right, I'm quite optimistic of combining environmental data with AI, especially generative AI, especially LLM. So recently I saw this new project, I think it is still under development, between Microsoft and Planet Explorer. So Planet Explorer is a database of satellite imagery. So you know that to access satellite imagery, you need a moderate level of technical skills to do that. But combining LLM, which is the large language model, with the Planet Explorer database, the program is able to allow you to communicate with the data more intuitively. You can ask to say that, hey, in my hometown called Johor in Malaysia, how the temperature has been for the past 10 years. And the program will show you like, okay, this is your hometown. It will show you the satellite imagery. It will show you the weather data, and it will answer your questions in a human way. It's just like there was another project done by a Taiwanese newsroom. They put the data of the top 100 biggest corporates, biggest Taiwanese companies, the whole database, and they put it in ChatGPT. So you're able to just extract any data by talking to ChatGPT. Tell me which are the top 10 companies with the highest percentage of female CEO, for example. Okay, so I think this will largely significantly lower the barrier for journalists to work with data. Right now, we know that there are a lot more tools for us to work with data, but when it comes to environmental data, you just try and visit NOAA websites and you try to use that data. You see there are so many different data sets using different standards, and there's so much to understand and so hard to make them talk to each other. So what I'm thinking is that in the future, if we are able to combine LLM with dataset, we can make the process much more intuitive and easier. And that might be able to bridge the gaps between Boyang just said, freelancer and newsrooms, as well as data journalists and journalists who are less savvy in data. You can, without using any coding, without using any spreadsheet, you can just ask the machine to say that, hey, I want to know what happened to the rainfall in this city in the past 5 years, and what is the major factors that cause the changes in rainfall, for example. And the machine will tell you that, according to this database, the data tells us that this is the factor. So I think like this is something that some people are already working on it, and I hope to see it will be out in the near future, so that most of us here are able to talk to data, and that will greatly assist our reporting. But very quickly, a challenge is that I think assessing high-resolution satellite imagery it is still a very expensive thing to do. Right now, whenever we are working on stories, only the largest newsrooms, you're talking about Washington Post, New York Times, they have the resources or they have the connections to get those high resolution imagery. For average journalists and newsroom, it's still very hard to get those imagery. We are talking about each image costs you hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. So that is another, I think there still remain a lot of challenges, but I am overall optimistic.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I think, okay, I will not make a prediction, but I can give you assessment of the future. And I think you will be able to actually relate why and how things are changing and why we absolutely have no clue how things are changing. I think for the first time in the human history, we have access to more data than we are able to consume and understand. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, journalists were trained to collect information, go conduct interviews, come back with stories, collect quotes, and we were trained in journalism colleges to how to do that. The future is absolutely somewhere, on a different turf. The future of journalism, or that matter, the data plays a critical role, will be, and people who will be successful in the future of journalism will be the people who have better observation skills, who have better analytical skills, because the data is all there in trillions of documents getting public across Asia. I don't know how many of you cover Asia, and if you look at every Asian government releases millions of documents every year. And I do not think that you will have a future newsroom where you do not have as a co-worker a technologist sitting next to you or engineers sitting next to you, helping you actually to make sense of that data. But as a journalist, you can't become technologist or scientist and then work around the data. I found two things. I come from India. We run an organization, Data Leads. Data actually leads. And I built this organization 10 years ago with two people. And in the last 10 years, we've trained almost 20 million people on data skills. 900 universities, more than 10,000 newsrooms across Asia Pacific. And it was a revelation for us, to be honest, how much these skills can change the way we look at the future. At the moment, 6 engineering colleges in India are teaching engineers how to detect fake news. They're trained engineers, they have nothing to do with journalism. And we are getting these students into our newsrooms. Half of our team today is actually technologists, not the journalists. So I think that is one. Second, I really think, as Ken actually beautifully mentioned about satellite data, I think one of the critical data where journalists are not really paying enough attention is the health data. Data about diseases, vaccines, whatever, is a massive global data set. And we run a website called crux.co.in actually, which has all the public data in the world accessible at a single website from different, more than I think 30, 40 resources. And why we did that also, we learned very early, and I can close on that you cannot actually work as a journalist in 2030, 10 years after this, if you do not have strong, deep collaboration with domain experts. So we collaborated with scientists and doctors. We started with 4 doctors, 5 doctors. Much before COVID, we invited 100 scientists and doctors and journalists to Singapore 6 months before the COVID to discuss health misinformation. And we ended up today having doctors in 44 countries who work as a volunteer to help us to make sense of health data. So I think future will be around who will make sense of the data, not who will really collect the data. Yeah, I will stop here.
Hi everyone, I am Piyush. I work with India Today Group, one of the biggest broadcast newsrooms in India. I work with the data team there, and we've been using AI for quite a long time. We launched our AI anchor called Sana in March 2023, So it was in English to begin with, but now we have also launched in regional Indian languages and across YouTube for YouTube channels. Like we have a few YouTube channels where we publish state-specific regional news. And also this week while I'm here, we one of the we created an AI avatar of one of the popular Hindi anchors in India, and we did a live debate for a few moments on the national TV. We are really optimistic about where AI is going, and like Kang said, we are also working on one of the project where we are integrating large language models with the election data, focusing on the upcoming elections next year. And we have it's like chatting with the data, where you can like ask any questions like, can you tell me who won this election, in which year, how many seats that specific party won, can you tell me how many candidates won with a specific winning margin. So, and it's also like now the large language models that we have access to and the tools we have access to, including ChatGPT, Bard, and other plugins from ChatGPT like Code Interpreter and Notable. So data journalism is not like restricted to only a few people who are good in Excel, who may be good in programming. But even if you don't know how to use Excel, but you have Excel sheets or data with you, you can use tools like Code Interpreter or Notable plugins, and you just need to upload the Excel sheets and just write a simple prompt. Because in the last 6 months, since this ChatGPT wave has started, we are only limited by our imagination, like how articulately, how precisely we can describe our problem, like be a prompt master, like Hank said in one of the sessions. If we can, it's like talking to a child. If you can explain your problem to a child, you can explain a problem to as a prompt to any OpenAI or any of the chat large language model platforms, you can get the work done. And there's always a conversation like is AI or is OpenAI or tools like are going to replace journalists. I don't think so. They are going to complement our work, because in our newsroom, like we are using these tools to do much work at a faster pace. We don't have to use for simple things. You can get the code also. ChatGPT can also write a code for you. You just need to know basics of any programming language, and you can get the code written from that, and you can build on top of that. Now, talking about few challenges that we see we are facing, one is definitely the cost. It's expensive. Like you may need high-end GPUs to host these kind of language models, or if you are using OpenAI's APIs, then you are paying by the tokens or the amount of usage. Another thing would be to figure out which language model to use if you are working with the textual data. And one more thing, talking about the language models, these are language models. Don't consider them as knowledge models. So sometimes I see many people trying to get their stories written from ChatGPT. So that's not, we should be using them. It can be used for copy editing. If you can try, like we have done sometimes, so it gives a very good result. It can be used for translation. If you know one language, if you want your story to be written in another language, that can be done. It can be used for sentiment analysis. So it's all, you are only limited by your imagination. And the third challenge I would say is about one is definitely the cost. Second is about selecting which language model. And another challenge, she mentioned about the biasness, because most of these language models or most of these generative AI platforms are trained on the Western data. So we did one story, I remember in early April, I guess, where we were exposing the political lack of political knowledge of these language models. For example, you can't generate certain images from Midjourney of, let's say, Hitler or Jinping. But even for South Asian leaders, if you ask Midjourney, can you tell me who are the top or popular South Asian leaders, it would go blank. So that's also one of the challenges is there. Thank you.
I'm Jeff Kelly Lowenstein, the founder and executive director of the Center for Collaborative Investigative Journalism, or CCIJ. I also teach journalism at Grand Valley State University in Michigan, the United States. I'm very grateful to be here with Ajibola Amzat, our Africa editor, and Ayuka Kawakami, our data fellow. And for me, it's a real honor to be here on the panel. I really am grateful to be here with colleagues and mentors and friends like Brant and Jennifer, who I've known for many years, and to be here together with all of you, where, first of all, we're all still here on a Friday afternoon at the last panel, but also with our new leader, Emmy, and I'm so proud to be under her leadership. So I just wanted to offer, say that I also offer predictions with humility. I don't know about you, but we applied at CCIJ for funding from Google News Initiative for innovation in the fall of 2019, and our proposal was to have a totally remote international newsroom. And we got to the finals. And then by the time the interview came, COVID had come, and everybody in the entire world was working remotely. So on the one hand, we could say the prediction was right. On the other hand, when you're in that interview, you just know you're not getting that grant. So I just wanted to offer three thoughts. One around AI. I think I see it as being more and more a beat, that the analysis of the work itself. Garance Burke here at this conference has done a lot of excellent work on that. Meredith Broussard, who's a friend and colleague in the United States, has written about that. I see it in the distribution and engagement of the work itself. So it's not just in all the tools and the kind of things that our colleagues have already been talking about, but once that work is finished, how it's sent out into the world, and reckoning with this increasingly contested space for people's attention. So my wife and I were in Japan last semester for sabbatical, and through that I met Daisuke Furuta from the Japan Fact Check Center, and he talked about how colleagues in Taiwan are combating misinformation by using AI to detect it, manually putting out the correct information, and then using AI to then distribute it, the accurate information out. So really using AI in a way to combat the misinformation of AI. So I just want to mention that in terms of AI. In terms of data visualization, I think that we need to reckon with the reality that audiences are increasingly visually oriented. And so to think of data visualization as part of the larger category of visual work as a whole, and to really put that as an equal partner with data and investigative tools. I think often in the investigative community and data journalism community, the visual can be a little bit more complementary, so to encourage us to think about not only to partner as equal partners, but sometimes even to lead the investigation. So at CCIJ, visual, data, and investigative are the equal partners from the beginning of the projects, and at times the visual leads the investigation. So we just had a project recently where we drew on the work that a photographer had done chronicling the change in the Colorado River over 20 years. So it wasn't only very powerful, impactful work emotionally, but it also chronicled the investigative impact that then our work showed. And then I think the last thing that I would say, and this is more of a nascent thought, is that I think we also need to reckon with the reality that there's a global assault on truth happening in all these different ways. And so I think we who work with data and who do investigative work need to think about the role of emotion for the individual project, with the journalist, and then with the organization, almost as a buttress around the titillating impact that misinformation can often have. And so it's not to say that we want to be manipulative, but just more to reckon that part of how misinformation goes so wide and then makes it harder for our investigative work to have impact is from that emotional charge that people get from getting it and then sharing it really quickly. So I would just suggest in the future that we might think about that as well. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm Emmy, and in the last hours I became the new director of GIJN. Before that, I was data and research editor at the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, where I had an immense honor of working with a multidisciplinary team, a mix of skills and talents when we're working with data. Great data researchers, great data analysts, great coders, some experts on AI. In all these years, and I'm starting with, yes, you might have heard ICIJ had dealt with millions of records, sometimes scattered, lots of data. I have to say, we all talk about data, but we don't talk about how bad the data is. The data is horrible, it's a mess. And the more data we get, the more messy it gets, and the more the risks we have. Because we are risking getting the wrong results. We're risking misleading, doing the wrong analysis, connecting the wrong information. So we will have more challenges the more data we get. Yes, it's exciting times, and you can get AI. I tried actually, and I asked ChatGPT to do an analysis on how many patients had died because of the use of a medical device, and their death had not been reported as such. ChatGPT got it all wrong. And that's something, an analysis that we had done at ICIJ on a medical devices project using machine learning. And it took us 11 people to fact check and validate the results of that analysis. So there are lots of possibilities, but I want us to always keep in mind that the methods that we use and the fact checking and the validation and the standards need to remain the same, because otherwise we can be using amazing tools to try to think we're connecting the dots, we're using the latest technology, but we might actually getting everything done wrong. And the more languages you get, the worse it gets. Because even the AI translates things in a horrible way, even nowadays. So that's something I wanted to start with. I do think there is a lot of potential. I do see more growth on our end on data collaborations, not only among data teams, but also among data journalists and scientists. And I think that will help us path away on understanding how AI and other technologies, I haven't seen yet quantum computing landing on investigative journalists, but that's a new hype for the computer science industry. But it's for us to help us find where the pitfalls are, where the possibilities are, and I think those collaborations are going to lead us also into the future. Also partnerships with universities and computer science experts at universities. So I think that's one aspect that I think it's important to highlight. I think the power of multidisciplinary teams and engaging, so the data is no longer an abstract thing that is for the data people. I think data is going to be more embedded in the newsrooms, because now that there is more excitement in using these tools, because, it's easy to use, it's user-friendly, there is more understanding on how that will happen and what are the questions that we need to ask. Actually, it can help us with our journalistic processes. That leads us to involving data in all the different elements of the newsroom. So editors are part of it, reporters are part of it, and data journalists also are part of it. So then it's more an integral part of the process and not a part of only the data people. The data people are going to be there to advance the work and use those technologies. And on one end is, how can you use AI to advance? Yes, but AI is not going to be only the answer for everything. So we will need to be critical on when AI is our answer for our problems. Do we have massive amounts of records, for instance, that we need to explore? But if we have a spreadsheet with 100 rows and we can sort that out with a filter in seconds, we don't need AI for that. So we'll need to recognize when the time is correct to use AI or to use other technologies to do our data analysis. So I do think that there's a combination of building our own databases as we have done it traditionally, and using the latest technology to connect the dots and advance on that. I think I've seen a lot, also some initial processes talking about visualizations that can help us advance with the reporting processes. Also, graph database companies are exploring the integrating AI into the use of graph databases so they can help us detect connections. And the question is where the data is coming from. is the data that we have processed clean, or are we getting the data somewhere else? So we will need to be critical about that too. So then how sure are we about the analysis that we're doing? So those are some thoughts that I had, and I do think that leads us also to more fact-checking data skills developed in our newsrooms for the data processes that we will help. And I think, is that I lost track of time, sorry. I get very passionate when I talk about data. Okay, I will add it to Jennifer then. Thank you.
Sorry, I wanted to be saying, amen, sister, come on, I love that. Be critical of it. Okay, I'm going totally rogue on this and doing something slightly related. First of all, I agree what everyone has said. These tools are good. I especially agree with being critical of the data and knowing the quality of the underlying data. We're actually using a lot of large language models to discover history in documents that have never before been revealed. So I think we can use it to go backwards as well instead of just forwards. But I want to talk about, as we go forward, that we need to make data journalism inclusive, because so many of the things that we do are not readable to a lot of people. So we don't we don't always use alt text on graphics so that people who use screen readers instead of vision can understand the graphics. We need to test our apps and graphics for vision levels such as colorblind levels, and think about the audience and what communication they might need to understand what you're trying to portray in your data analysis. You might be reporting about an audience that doesn't even have the ability to understand what you're saying. So make sure you understand what your audience needs. And I just try reading my stories and my graphics using a screen reader. I use NVDA, and it helps me a lot understand little things that make things more useful. Like if you read a screen reader and your numbers do not have commas, it goes 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But if you have commas, it says 23,342,000. So little things like that can really help. I want to talk about one project we did at the Center for Public Integrity, where I am an editor and I'm also teaching at Berkeley. We did this project looking at access to homes for those with complex needs. The lead character in the story, her main language was sign language. The major audience for the story is people with developmental disabilities. So we translated the story both into what's called plain language, which there is, if you Google plain language translation, and you probably do it with ChatGPT, it's simplified but does not leave out the facts. And then because our main character in the story was ASL was her main language, American Sign Language, we also did a sign interpretation version of the story. So I don't have a lot more. I agree with what everyone said and look forward to a little bit more banter with everyone. I think that's all I have. Oh, and ncdj.org is a great resource if you're looking for more information.
Okay, thanks very much. One of the things I like to do is get outside our profession, and I'd like you to guess who's working on this. They have a website and they have these areas of interest. One is artificial intelligence, another is machine learning, and another is quantum computing. So now who would that be? Well, there are a couple of places that are worth looking at that are associated with intelligence and military in the US. One is called DARPA, and the other is called IARPA, and I'm reading IARPA. So I think it's worth looking outside ourselves to try to see what else other people are up to. Does anyone know where the internet came from? What was the original internet? Yeah, but it was basically, it was a military project, ARPANET. So there are these other people out doing some pretty cool stuff that we should borrow and reference, and I really say keep an eye on DARPA and IARPA. There's some amazing stuff there. That was one thing I wanted to bring up in our discussion. But before we go on with the future, I kind of want to think about things we've been really eager to use and excited about. So what has happened with AR? We haven't mentioned that. Augmented reality. What has happened with virtual reality? What's happened with metaverse? So I just throw that out there. You know, why haven't these caught on? We were so excited. There were some interesting projects with AR and VRs and metaverse. I know. Maybe Jeff, start with you. Like, what do you think's going on that we got very excited about this stuff and now it's just blown away by AI? I don't know.
Yeah, no, well, thank you, the panelists, for the points around disability that you raised, Jennifer, and so on, everybody, and then for what you were saying, Brian. I think that's a really good point about thinking outside of our own discipline and seeing who is doing things well. So, yeah, at CCIJ, we have a metaverse designer as one of our core team members. She is a artist, former chef, organic farmer, and metaverse designer from Italy. So she's very cool.
The restaurant sounds interesting. Is it in Michelin? Right.
That's right. So we, it's a really good question about, you know, the degree to which things have or have not caught on. And what I would say is that one of the things that we've tried to do with Serena, and one of the things that I admire about her work, is that she has become increasingly integrated in the newsroom. And then as she's become increasingly integrated in the newsroom, the work that she's produced has been much less sort of out there and kind of this totally immersive, distinct place, and more something that's congruent with what the rest of the team is producing, and looking both to share the work itself, and the metaverse and some of the immersive realities can actually be very helpful in terms of authenticating the information that's presented, but also in terms of then having an experience in which folks can then feel what it's like to be in the space, not just actually absorb it through watching the material or reading it. And so I guess I would say that what we try to do is to integrate that effort to reach new audiences with the other efforts that we have, which is with the journalists we work with, we have their website and their social media, our website and our social media. We have a podcast. We have a series of partners that partner routinely. We have partners that are subject specific. And then we have people who also then at different points find the work. So for us, we try to think of the metaverse and the work that we do there not in its own in isolation, but as part of a larger distribution effort. So for example, when we do trainings now, we offer trainings online through Zoom, but then we also offer them through a metaverse space, and the numbers there actually have grown. So I think that each space kind of takes its own place, and that sometimes through innovation, the results don't actually work in the sense of generating huge audiences. But to the point that you were making earlier, Brand, I think it's actually important for us to continue to try and find new ways and spaces to reach different audiences. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Anybody else willing or wanting to comment on, is there a future for VR or AR at this point? I'll put it right out there. I think Boyoung may have a thought.
It's not a thought, and I'm terrible at predictions, which is why I was terrified at being on this panel. But speaking of AR, VR, and this is not a prediction, or I'm not saying it, we have hope for it, but a good example of where augmented virtual reality was augmenting the reporting and making the reporting findings more accessible to the audience was a project by the New Yorker. The Pulitzer Center supported this project. Ben Malk is a contributor to the New Yorker, and he did a project on the Xinjiang Uyghur detention centers in China, where the Chinese government is basically locking up these minority Uyghurs. And because there are no photographs available, videos available, this journalist used virtual reality to make a film to bring the reader or the audience inside what it feels like to be in a detention center. So I thought that was an excellent use of virtual reality. And I'm not saying that it's the use of VR or AR could only be restricted to the presentation, but I think it makes sense whenever it's cost effective or it adds on a lot to an impactful story. I think another opposite, I think the opposite of that example would be a project that we did not support. And I would not name names or explain what the project was about, but basically they wanted to use virtual reality for a project to show how small a space was. And we thought that the amount of budget that was required to produce that was not proportionate to the impact that it would bring to the public. So I think it's a cost balance analysis that we always have to do, and to find the best way to do that in an efficient way would be a challenge.
Thank you. So one other thing I want to touch on and then open up to the audience is, it seems we have the potential to develop better instant responses to falsehoods, to things that happen. I wonder how we're starting to think about that in a newsroom. Like, we're always like, if there's a disaster or whatever, data has helped us prepare for that. We can access a lot of things. I've seen and been talking to people working on disinformation projects, and part of it is the disinformation gets out and then it takes a longer time to get any kind of response to it. So I think we're talking about fact checking more than we ever have. Do any of you have ideas of what might that look like ahead of us? That, do we have a disinformation team in a newsroom that goes, this is the latest piece of crap on the social media. This is the latest medical falsehood or something like that. So what would that look like, do you think? Yeah.
Well, talking to other disciplines, actually, I had a great conversation with a computer scientist from a university recently, they were actually exploring building apps, add-ons on the website that would allow you to immediately audience engagement to help and advance, like building knowledge and use AI and machine learning to help advance and detect misinformation in a more active way. So with user engagement, which I found interesting. So are there ways in which there are processes and tools that allow us and that users and the audiences can use,
but don't magnify the disinformation.
No, try to find the misinformation, and you could actually even flag aspects of a story that would lead to misinformation while you're reading a story, or flag, and then that helps build community in addressing misinformation. And you could even have models that allow you to generate alerts. Yeah. So I found that interesting. It's. I hope I didn't disclose anything confidential. So off the record, don't start spreading the word there. But I found it very interesting. So that academics are exploring.
And I'm working with a cross-disciplinary team at Illinois that's trying to figure out how you flag the latest misinformation in the medical field, and immediately or as quickly as possible disseminate this is the real story. But I would think, and I'm just wondering what you think, that at some point we may have disinformation teams as a part of a newsroom or part of a collaboration of newsrooms. Yeah, excited. Yeah.
Just to give again, India is big, so scale is always an issue. In 2018 in India, we had 6 fact checkers. 2018. I'm coming to how newsrooms are changing. And we started a massive, with support from Google, and amazing Irene Jailu, I don't know whether she's here or not, amazing leadership from her. And she said, do you think, and that was 2018, there was the hate you see from India, hate speech, harmful content, misinformation, elections, it was not so massive at that time. And her first question was, in a meeting in Singapore, say, do you see a tide of misinformation emerging from South Asia? I said, absolutely. She said, what is the solution? As this, we need to train more people to identify misinformation. She said, how can we do it? We said, we can throw an open call, select a couple of folks and train them. We ended up announcing a call only for India. We got 9,000 editors and journalists applying for that. We selected 250. We trained them in East, North, South, West, and Central of India in person for 5 days. We got some of the best trainers globally to India. Today, we have 65,000 fact checkers in India, including the TV and Network 18, which is India's biggest network. We trained that team as well to launch that network. Almost, as of today, India has the highest number of IFCN signatories. All of them got benefited from this training. What I will maybe come back again, what we are really fearful of when we look at the future, and that is a very human tendency, is the fear of failure. No media company is ready to invest and do an R&D and try to do something on its own. And there are no resources to give it to 10 journalists, say, hey, even if you fail, we will learn something out of it. And that is restricting our limitations to imagine something which could be absolutely different. I think once we surpass that fear, and there is a little bit resources available to do that R&D, even in journalism colleges, to be honest. As I said, we work with a lot of universities across Asia, and I do not see that innovation even in a journalism curriculum. Like last year, Google came up with a tool, and this is tool only for journalists, which Google has come up, Pinpoint. Amazing tool, to be honest. You can upload 200,000 documents in a single go, and you can get analysis of data without doing anything. So the work you were doing, say in a 10 days, 20 days, you can do that in 2 minutes. And it took us a lot of time to have an understanding with journalism faculty members that they need to include these tools into the curriculum. So I think innovation is really the key, and I think we are very slow when we compare banking industry, automobile, other industry, or medicine for that matter. Google is investing billions of dollars in diagnostics, identifying, and I'm glad to see, at least from the conversations we're having with a lot of journalism newsrooms, I see something early warning systems coming up in next 1 or 2 years in different newsrooms. They will come up with the systems, but they will be able to identify. We work on a project, quite confidential, can't talk about it. We helped tech platforms to remove almost 2 million videos about COVID, which was misinformation. So it was based on technology, based on different tools and techniques, but I think it needs a little bit R&D and a vision at a leadership level, unfortunately, which is a little bit missing across.
One quick thing. It's so nice to hear that, because in the US, most news organizations have completely cut out their fact-checking, copy editing staff. So it's nice to hear that it's happening elsewhere.